So I had recently done a junk removal job for a customer, and she referred me to one of her friends who needed a couple of light bulbs replaced. When she first called me, she didn't really know what she needed. She just knew she had this problem of her lights on either side of her house. The security lights were shining very brightly into her neighbor's windows at night, and it was just too extreme. And the neighbors were kind of complaining and asking if she could do something about it. So I basically got this text message that said, "Hey, here's my problem. Can you come help solve this for me?" And so I recommended that she just replace the light bulbs in those lights to a less bright light. And they were up really high, so it was going to mean getting a ladder to get up there and change them out. And so she decided she wanted to move forward with it. And the day that I went out there, it was a super cold day, and I brought a folding ladder that I had. I have a couple of different kinds of ladders that I use for stuff like this. One of them is more of the stereotypical extension ladder, but I don't like to own extension ladders that are just crazy, crazy long because it becomes difficult to store them. Getting them on the truck is more difficult. They're just huge. And so I have this folding ladder that can still go really high. And so I brought that type for this. Also, I was in kind of a tight spot, and so this would kinda treat the ladder like a little transformer that I could get to the size I need to get in there and then extend it out and get it where I needed to go. And whether it's an extension ladder or one of these folding ladders, it is a situation where you'll at least have to have a certain amount of strength just to manage them in some of the areas that you're in that can be really tight spots. And physically, you're gonna have to maneuver this ladder wherever it needs to go. And that can be a nerve-wracking part of the process. A lot of times when someone's calling to get something like this done, they're just thinking about the problem, of course, that they want to have solved. But there also are some behind-the-scenes factors that go on that not everyone necessarily is thinking about. And this is an example of that. When you're maneuvering a ladder in a tight spot like this, pressure really is on to make sure that you don't make any kind of mistake where that ladder could then sway over and hit a window. It could damage a fence. This was in a certain area where there are very expensive finishes, even on the fence, you know? So any kind of damage or even nick or mark that could be made, obviously when a ladder of that size comes down, it's not necessarily going to be a small nick or scratch, right? It can really do some damage. So pressure really is on just to be able to physically maneuver it and make sure that there isn't any kind of problem that happens just getting the ladder where you need it to go. So I was able to maneuver it in place. And the first step was to simply go up and take the current light bulbs out because I was simply going to be going and replacing these with a less bright light bulb that wasn't going to be as harsh in that area. And so I got that done, got the ladder down, and then moved to the other side of the house. And this was a different situation where the light was a all-in-one built-in LED light. So the light was built into the light fixture itself, and it was not a replaceable type of light. And so in this type of light, what I knew I needed to look for was some kind of built-in switch that would be up there. And sure enough, when I got up there, the switch was set to high and the settings were high, medium, and low. And so I switched it down to the low setting so that it wouldn't be as bright anymore. And I also adjusted the tilt a little bit to direct it away from the house. I wasn't able to adjust it much because of where it currently was already, but I was able to make at least enough to where it would be able to make a difference. And so once again, this was in a very tight area. And so I was able to get the ladder up where I needed it to go. And then taking it down, I was able to not hit anything in the process, getting that ladder back down. And so now the next step was I needed to go get the replacement bulbs, the new bulbs that I was going to put in there. And this is something that probably the average person would think to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that. And I no longer do that because these light bulbs have gotten to a point where there's so much going on with them. There's so many different options and factors that go into a light bulb that as probably everyone knows by now, you can't really rely on anyone at Home Depot to have that level of knowledge that you're going to need, because this is not the type of thing that you can be doing a back and forth situation with. And so I took these bulbs straight to that specialty light store. And once I got there, I explained what the situation was. And this is also something where a lot of people don't realize that there are different factors that are even available within a light bulb, similar to paint. Sometimes a lot of people, when they're trying to match a paint color, they're just thinking about the color, but there's also the sheen, and the sheen is how shiny it is or how dull it is, and that can affect the match as well. Well, there's something similar going on like that with light bulbs as well. You have the color tone of the light, which you may be familiar with that, seeing like the daylight or the bright light or bright white type terminology that there will be on the light bulbs. Then there's also the level of brightness. So, how bright or dull will that particular shade of light be? And then this is one a lot of people aren't aware of, but there's also a distance that can be a factor as well. So that means how wide and how far out that light is going to cast from the light bulb. And so these were all things that I was mentioning to the person that worked at this store, and they, of course, are familiar with these issues. And so they can zero in and really get to the bulb that's going to be the right solution for what is needed. And that is so important for someone like me who can't afford to be wasting time and get it wrong, right? And so that's why I just go straight to a specialty store that handles these types of things. And so he got me set up with something that was going to work great. And I go ahead and drive back to get those put in. And so I get the ladder back out there because I typically don't leave very expensive tools like this on a job just hanging out there open to the world. So I got the ladder back in position, climbed up it, and put the new light bulbs in place. And something that I had noticed when I first took them down was there was actually a crack on one of the plastic pieces that held one of the bulbs, and it was broken. So it was really just a wire that was hanging and dangling there. And anytime you have a customer that's asking you to do one particular task, the last thing they want to hear is to find out, oh, we've uncovered this additional issue that also needs to be replaced. And so I wanted to do my best to go ahead and just solve this because I knew this was not something she was anticipating paying for, which would basically mean having to replace the light fixture. So now you got to buy a new light fixture and pay for that, plus the cost of putting a new one in. And so I was going to see what I could do to just solve this for her. And I went ahead and drove back home to get a construction grade hot glue gun that I had. And I was able to put that piece back in place, line it up where it was. And then I just kind of put as much hot glue around it that I could to create a mold around it so that it would really just kind of lock into place and stay there. And this particular type of glue gun is on a much higher level than like a craft glue gun. And so I just went ahead and did that for her. And this was something that could very well likely last another 5 to 10 years potentially. And so I just wanted to do what I could to get that solved for her so that she didn't have to get that bad news of, hey, guess what? This is going to be even more expensive, right? And so that was something I had gotten when I took the trip to go get the light bulbs. And so by the time I was done, I had positioned those light bulbs even further in so it wouldn't go as far as the previous bulb would, on top of being a less bright light. So it really was going to be an improvement compared to what was there. And so on top of that, I was just also positioning them even a little bit further back just to make sure that it was going to light it up enough to be effective in that area, but also make sure that it wasn't a situation where I might have to come back and do any kind of adjustment with it, right? And so as I was finishing it up, she came out and was taking a look at the new lights, and she was really appreciative. Now she had her new light bulbs in. The issue with that light was now solved, and it was holding and staying together. And now her neighbors didn't have to deal with these super bright lights on either side of the house. They were greatly toned down from where they were. So she was happy, the neighbors were happy, I was happy, and it was time to move on to the next job. I show creatives how to get paid to do jobs just like this so they can become their own funding source and have the money and free time they need to pursue their artistic interests. I break it all down at cashcowartist.com. The link is in the description.